It's become my passion. Originally, I was going to become a pilot, but making a film about airplanes and aviation has really been a dream come true for me. But they were so amazed and so joyous and so struck by these two incredible machines that just kind of came out of nowhere. And they were very likely seeing aviation for the first time. And to them, it was amazing and beautiful and extraordinary, and all the things that the movie is trying to convey to the jaded population today. My name is Brian Terwilliger, and I'm the producer-director of 16 Right and Living in the Age of Airplanes.
You know, there's a short list of people I wanted to have on the podcast when I decided to make podcasting on a plane a thing. And I remember thinking of people, some of whom I'd met, some of whom I hadn't yet, but all of whom had had an effect on me and, of course, on all of us. And Brian, well, he's definitely one of those people. Why, though? Well, he made a cool movie about flying. Well, yeah, but it's deeper than that. Because what he did was to tell the story that we all wanted to, the story of the romance of aviation. Think of it this way. When you're trying to explain aviation to someone who doesn't have the sickness and all you get in return is one of those, that's nice kind of stares, well, Brian changed that for all of us. Ever since 16 Right, all you need to do is show the film to someone, and that's it. And it isn't just us aviation people. The critics loved it too. With the enormous weight of expectation on the heels of 16 Right came Brian's second film, Living in the Age of Airplanes. But this one was different. Sure, it had star power. I mean, heck, it was narrated by Harrison Ford. But it was a conceptual piece. And even though I consider it to be a masterpiece and another home run, I think that point may have been missed by a few people. I mean, probably not you and I, since if you're listening to this podcast, well, you probably appreciate aviation on a much deeper level than just purely operational. Not that there's anything wrong with videos of airplanes taking off and landing. But a few people expected 16 Right Part 2, which, of course, was never the aim of the film, and it makes an extraordinary point of perspective on what it's like to be living in this rapidly moving piece of history in which we all live. And that, of course, is the age of airplanes. All right, man. Well, I was thinking the other day because I was rummaging through my I've been kind of redoing my whole office here to record. And one of the things I had to move was a picture I've got up on the wall here. And that was from 16 Right. It was the movie poster. And we met a while ago. 13 years ago now, when that movie came out. And we met it was a small theater in Hillcrest here in San Diego. And you were screening the film. And I think my whole flight school came down and watched it. But we talked briefly and you signed the movie poster for me. And that was what kind of got me thinking, when I started this podcast, you were actually one of the first couple of people I wanted to talk to on the show. And I realized, how have I not contacted Brian yet? So, I finally got in touch with your PR, and here we are. So first off, thank you so much for being on the show. Oh, thank you. Great to be here. Now, you're obviously a big aviation guy, but additionally, of course, you're a filmmaker and lots of other things. But just for those of us, I guess, that haven't really heard of your aviation background, tell us a little bit about that. Yeah, so aviation, I guess, is my first love ever since I was a little kid. It's been my passion. So I had, a room full of aviation posters and aviation calendar every year. And then I got into model planes, always about aviation and airplanes for some reason. Don't know when it started, but went to as many air shows as I could. I grew up in Connecticut and eventually got into model planes, building, flying,
more and more sophisticated model airplanes, and eventually started taking flying lessons and got my pilot's license when I was 19, turning 20. But prior to that, sometime in my teenage years, I learned that my color blindness, which I knew for a long time that I was colorblind, but the implications in aviation and a career in aviation are such that you can't fly at night and you have a limitation on your medical. So as a result, there was no career for me in flying, and all of the lifelong dreams of becoming a professional pilot sort of evaporated quickly. But around the same time in high school, I got interested and exposed to the film industry and video production classes in high school. And it ended up being really a wonderful turning point because I was able to then, create films and tell stories about aviation. So it's combined really two passions of mine.
That's cool. And, I was reading your bio, and I like the part where it says that you attended Cal State Northridge and you created your own major in business and entertainment. And after you graduated, you wanted to learn all about the film industry, of course, worked in various capacities, and then, of course, started making your own films. But when I read that, I love that, because one of the things about this podcast that I've always wanted to share with people is that obviously aviation has sort of the big three operational jobs, like pilot, mechanic, air traffic control, right? The three most operational, obvious things. Mm-hmm. But there are so many things you can do in aviation that aren't one of those three things. And, I've done two out of those three things. So, lest I sound like a hypocrite, I've done them, but I've always wanted to spread all this other stuff. I mean, it's truly endless what else you can do that revolves around airplanes. So tell me about that, because when you created your own major to put the things together that weren't even aviation related, even though that was your passion, that takes a lot of something. And I want to hear more about it.
Yeah. Well, so by the time college came around, I was already pursuing, a career in the film industry, aviation or aviation industry, becoming a pilot or any other part of that industry was moved to the side. My whole focus was film industry. But as I looked at college degrees and looked at different focuses of majors, I learned, basically a curriculum is only a set of classes, a predetermined set of these amount of, English classes, math, whatever. There's, it's just a set of classes that create a certain major, by the college, and then they give it a name. It's called a degree in business administration, or, and all it is a set of classes. They attach a name to it. That's the curriculum. And there it is. And so there was no curriculum or no major that quite fit what I really wanted to do and the type of skill sets that I wanted to hone to have the career and pursue the career that I was, in the process of doing. So I sat down with them, and they had a very small program called a special major, and it allowed you, with approvals from all the heads of the different departments, if you could get them all to agree to this, because you can't just create your own major and it just goes. There was a lot involved in it. But anyways, I pursued it and was able to create a very specific set of classes, created my own curriculum, and then got to name the major. And that was it. So it was business and entertainment. I didn't want a film degree. I didn't want just a business degree. I wanted a very specific set of classes and course of study. And so I was able to do it.
That is so cool. Now, what advice might you have then for somebody who desires a career in aviation, or at least thinks that they desire a career in aviation, but maybe runs into an obstacle like you did with maybe it be a medical issue or a financial issue or something like that? They can't just have that straight shot right to the pilot seat or straight to whatever it is that they think that they want. Given that you were able to put that together, what advice would you have for somebody that encounters an obstacle like that?
Gosh, well, where there's a will, there's a way. For me, though, again, I don't consider myself in the aviation industry. I just make movies about aviation as a subject matter. But clearly, with the major that I created and creating your own path, taking the road less traveled, these are all things that are part of the fabric of who I am. And I like to do things different, not just because they're different, but because they feel like the right thing to do, or there's not quite a box that I fit into, or the type of interest that I have is slightly different from what's being offered. So I just find it's been a very fruitful path for me, and one that I continue to this day, thinking outside the box and really following my passions. And if you really work hard and you're passionate about what you do, and that is your focus, and you're just trying to do the very best you can do about what it is that you love, everything else seems to just work out.
Man, right on. Well said. Okay, so you graduated with this specific major, which, I mean, geez, talk about setting yourself up. You have the creative side and then the business side. I'm sure after that you probably had to sort of grind out a bunch of work for other people before you were able to get on some big projects and make stuff for your own. How did that go right after college?
Yeah, that's right. So what I did during the 4 years of college, I was doing freelance work in the film industry as I was doing my 4-year college degree. So I was every week for more or less the 4 years, even more intense during the summers, of course, I was doing all sorts of odd jobs in the film industry. First as an intern, and then soon after was getting paid for all the jobs. But I was everything from a grip to an electrician to editor, cameraman. I got into production managing, assistant directing, production coordinating. I was a projectionist in a theater for a few months. I was wanting to learn every single facet of the industry in order to best understand what it takes to make a movie and produce and direct a film. And so the more you understand all the moving parts, I think the better understanding you have, and frankly, the more respect you'll have as a leader or as a director of a crew, if you've done their job and you understand what's reasonable, what's not, what it takes and how much time and money it will take to get and do what you're asking of them. So it was really important to me to build that experience. So that's what I did as a freelance person in the film industry during the 4 years of college, on top of what I was learning, of course, in college. So after my degree and after I graduated, I had a resume that was like 3 pages. Actually, I came across this recently in a box, and they're very odd jobs, but genuine work experience in the real world during those years. And it was really, really a really fantastic thing for me because I hit the ground running. I knew people working in the industry. It wasn't just theory, or it wasn't just film students. I was already in the industry. And so I was able to have a background and sort of a foundation beyond what just the education of the last 4 years was. It was really a practical work experience. And I was instantly able to go to bigger jobs on bigger sets, of course, longer term jobs, several months or weeks rather than just a couple days here and there. I was doing much smaller jobs when I was still in college. And then eventually got to the point where I had enough experience, I felt, and I didn't want to become an expert in any one of those positions. And I didn't want to get into the union in any one specific job, because then I'd become an expert and a professional in that specific job, whether it might be an editor or a DP, or a gaffer, or all the things that I was doing. I didn't want to actually pursue any of those for a career. So I got to the point where I felt the only thing left for me now is to go out, raise money, and go make my first film. And that was 1/6 Right.
Wow. Okay. So before you made that first film, what other films did you get a chance to work on that people might know about?
Well, 2 of the bigger ones would be Big Fish. That was, a Hollywood film. And then The Core, which was another film released in theaters. I don't know. Have you heard of either of those?
Yeah, no. Yeah, I've checked them out. And when I was looking through IMDb, I saw, the things that you have credits in. So what roles did you play in those 2 films? Or not roles play, but the jobs that you did, I should say, I guess.
Yeah, visual effects coordinator, I believe, was the job title for one or both of those. And that was really just being on set and doing a lot of measurements and collection of data, like basically camera data and measurements of the room and where the objects were relative to the camera, the lens that was used, the height of the lens, and all of this data that later in a computer, they need all of that to basically create an element or a digital visual effect, computer-generated element in that scene that would be accurate and the correct size and placement and lighting. And you have to collect all the data on set while you're filming. It's not something you can figure out after the fact. You have to have real life, real world data. And that was, a big part of the job. So it was a lot of fun being on the sets and being right in the middle of it. So, it was, again, that was one other aspect. I didn't mention that in the rattled off list of job descriptions, but visual effects work as well was something that I learned about. And so in both of my films, there were some, visual effects used. And again, it's really important to understand the process, the lingo, how it works, what you need to do on set in order to get what you want later. You can't just do it all later. You can try, but it will never look quite right. So, but yeah, those were the two biggest films. I mean, IMDb doesn't really list a lot of things, or I've worked on music videos and independent films and commercials and all sorts of things, and none of those are on IMDb. They don't categorize that sort of thing. So,
sure. Well, I'll tell you what, all of that experience put together that you made for yourself, all the way from making your major all the way up to all of that stuff that, some might call dues paying and others might call just having a great time learning and absorbing everything you can about an industry that you're passionate about. The culmination of that being your first film that you made being 1/6 Right, which was that doesn't sound like a first movie that somebody made. I mean, that really hit, I think, a sweet spot and really tugged at the heartstrings of really anybody that even has a passing interest in aviation. How did it feel to have a movie like 1/6 Right have that much impact as your first feature-length film?
Yeah, it was, a very pleasant surprise. It's interesting, as a filmmaker and that being the first film, there was no expectation of me as a filmmaker because there was no film that preceded that film. So nobody knew it was coming. Nobody knew, me or my name or my work, because being a crew member on all these other odd jobs is not really, you don't build a name for yourself, in terms of an audience or people anticipating what you're going to do next. What film, no one's going to ask, what film are you going to, be a grip on next or a visual effects coordinator on next. It's not really the sort of thing that you create like a reputation or an anticipation of your work. So in that way, it was a luxury, I've since learned, of course, to have a first film without anybody expecting it, not knowing what to expect, I suppose. And so in some ways I made the film for myself because it was collecting and archiving the passion that I had for aviation that's so difficult to explain. And it's such a intangible thing. If you don't already love aviation or have that bug, it's really hard to express and explain and relay that to somebody that doesn't think that way or feel that way or have that sort of same passion. And so the movie, the whole essence of it, the point of it, told through, a love story of the airport that I know well, my home airport where I learned to fly, Van Nuys Airport. But to tell the story of the passion and romance of flying and the love of flying they think all pilots share, somehow in a film that you could watch over and over and show it to anybody and sit them down, and rather than explain your love for aviation, you could show them this film and it will explain it for you. And in the release of the film, and I did that tour where we met in San Diego, and I think we went to 11 or 12 other cities, of course, in addition to DVD release, etc. It was amazing to see the response, the feedback, the reaction people were having, and the stories I would hear, and the emails we would receive about how it touched them and how it affected their lives. And some people literally got their pilot's license after watching the film. Some people never considered that was possible for them, and it was something that they since pursued and eventually got. And then they're writing an email once they have it. It was like a year or two later. It was incredible. And there was others that used to fly, since left it, no longer current. Maybe it's been 10 years, 20 years because they started a family, and the movie reminded them of their passion, reminded them of why they first got their ticket years before, and they got back into it after seeing the film. And there's a whole bunch of stories in between about how it affected them and the response people have had. And so it's really remarkable, and it's the ultimate reward as a filmmaker to have people respond and have people moved and affected in these ways, because that's really what the whole point is. The movie is a story that you want to have some connection. You want people to have some response to. If it's a comedy, you're wanting them to laugh. That's the best reward. In a movie like this, I wanted to relay my passion and my fascination and love of something. And when people receive the message I was trying to send, there's no better definition of success for me.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, what you just said, I think pretty well sums it up, because anybody listening to this podcast doesn't need to have the passion of aviation explained, but I believe deeply that every person listening to this podcast also has probably tried to explain it to somebody else. And
Sure.
if you're not a good storyteller, maybe by nature, then sometimes it's really hard and you just end up looking like a huge nerd and, no one wants to talk to you at a party because you're just going to talk about airplanes, right? But, it's like that old joke, right? You walk into a party, how do you know who's a pilot in the room? Because they're going to tell you.
That's right. That's right.
but what you've done right there, and I think that is the chord that you struck with this film. That's a perfect summation of it, is that you managed to tell the story and make other people feel that passion that we all have, but just can't seem to explain. So, it's funny. Right now, I think, and we'll get to talking more about him in a little bit, but a lot of people kind of consider Harrison Ford as the unofficial or maybe even semi-official now spokesperson of aviation because he's a celebrity and everyone knows him and he's a huge pilot and that's great. But, when you made this film, you did that. And I think you should probably get a little more recognition for actually being the spokesperson that actually told that story and made people who don't understand it now understand it.
Well, it's very kind. I mean, I hope it's, and I'm almost, my original, I guess, prompter or intent for the film wasn't even as grand as it became. I had tried to explain for myself my interest in love and passion for flying so much that through the film, I wanted to create an everlasting, be all end all explanation and archiving of why I love to fly, why I love airplanes, why I love general aviation, the importance of it. And it's interesting, of course, I'm not in the film itself. I'm not interviewed. I don't interview myself or have someone interview me. I'm interviewing a whole bunch of other people talking about all of these things. And what's interesting is when you tie it all together and all the interviews are cut to create the film that you see, everyone is really telling everyone else's story. It's sort of one continuous and collective story. And it's in many ways, it is my story of why I love aviation. And it's just really neat. There's something even more universal about it than I ever thought going into it. And the movie just got bigger and deeper and became a larger entity as it went on. And I got to a point where I realized what its full potential could be, which was, I think, greater than maybe what I first set out to do. And then in the middle to the end of the film and the completion of the film, I was very, very focused on honing in on and polishing what I saw this could actually be. And it took a lot more time as a result of that. But I'm certainly really proud of the final product and seeing the response to it it's been an amazing journey. Sure. And here we are 13 years on and people are still interviewing you about it. Yeah, I know. It's crazy. Yeah. We still get emails about it and, Amazon's still selling it every day and iTunes. I mean, it's incredible. People are seeing it for the first time every day. Here we are. Yeah, you're right. 13 years later, it's pretty incredible. Well, let's bring it up a little more recently, at least within the last couple of years. So living in the age of airplanes, that's the next sort of film that, really I would say was a hit, so to speak. And, I think a lot of people, it's kind of weird. I don't want to say it's misunderstood, but every once in a while, whereas 1-6 Right, I think was a universally understood home run. I think people may have had different expectations for living in the age, which again, are in their own heads, of course, but, start from the beginning of what sparked you to make the film in the first place and what message did you actually set out to send, and then how did it kind of end up following your original plan? Yeah, no, it's a great question. So after 1-6 Right in the couple of years that followed, so 2006, 2007, I was getting to the point at which, okay, what am I going to do next? I want to make another film. I want to make a bigger film, better film. Everything I learned making that first film and the reaction and sort of elevation of the film and its reach globally was way bigger and better than I ever could have hoped. And so it really got me excited about what I could really do with this, what I could really do with this medium of a documentary and the message and a story that I could tell. And so I thought long and hard about it. I wanted to stick with aviation versus some other entirely different genre, which, would be possible, but my passion certainly is in aviation. That was why I made my first film about it. And I had no reason not to make my second film on theme and in the same genre. But when I looked at like specifics of, okay, what's it going to be about exactly? A lot of people would ask me when I would speak about 16 Right, what airport are you going to do next? And it was never about that. And even though Van Nuys Airport obviously is the star of the film and it's, obviously centered around that airport, I really feel that film has told the story of all airports, of all general aviation airports, in a broader sense. And frankly, it's the only airport that I know. It's my home airport. I'm not qualified to make any other story about anyone else's airport. So that certainly was never a consideration for me to just go tell another story about another airport. But then when I looked at all the aviation stories that have been told, again, in the documentary genre, they're always about and have been about specific things, including 16 Right. It's a finite topic. Van Nuys, at the center, general aviation, the history of this airport, the love of flying from a pilot's perspective. But you got other documentaries that are about hot air balloons or the space shuttle or the SR-71 or the Wright brothers or the history of aviation or military aviation or World War II aviation. So they're usually pretty specific about a topic, an era, a person, a milestone, a world record, maybe on the Thunderbirds or the Blue Angels. And, 16 Right obviously was so personal and such a passionate, film for me. I was really looking for what is it that I could tell? What story could I tell that stays in aviation, but is new and unique and hasn't been told before? And like I said, there's been so many that have been told, obviously, about all of these different people, places, events, historical, milestones and achievements in aviation. But what I really found over the years after 16 Right was this incredible irony that still, and despite, of course, 16 Right existing, most people, again, not people on your podcast, not me, not you, but most people don't appreciate aviation the way we do. They don't love aviation the way we do. They don't think of it as this miracle. They think of it as an inconvenience, as a frustration, as an annoyance, because they think of commercial flying, their experiences at commercial airports, flying at commercial airplanes. When you say aviation or airplane, that's what they're thinking, and that's what their experience is. So I wanted to find a way to communicate and share and excite people that don't like airplanes and don't appreciate aviation at all, to completely make it new for them all over again, to make the ordinary extraordinary. And it's an incredibly difficult thing to get people interested in something they're genuinely not interested in, and to like something they genuinely have a disdain for. And in the process, I knew, of course, the 16 Right audience and the folks that liked that film, followed that film, have become fans of that film, are generally pilots and people that have a high appreciation for aviation. But that wasn't first and foremost my target audience, even though I hoped, of course, that anything that was a love letter to aviation and anything that's pro-aviation would be something aviation-minded people would support, because there's not enough positive stories and positive films about aviation. The media's news cycle when it comes to aviation is very much on the negative. Anything that goes wrong, that's what makes the news. So as a filmmaker and a documentarian in the aviation genre, I felt a real opportunity to do something that I had never seen before, which is a perspective film on what it means to live in the age of airplanes. Like, how lucky are we to even have this as a possibility? Most people that have ever lived on planet Earth never have lived in a time that they could go between any two places and not have to move there. This is all new to us in the last, century. It's really since the jet age that we're going so far. What was once a migration is now a vacation. It's all about the airplane. And this perspective is one that I think even a lot of people that fly and don't take it for granted actually probably even take it more for granted than you realize, because we don't have a perspective outside our own experience. None of us do. It's very difficult to know what it's like to be without something you've never been without. And so that's at the core of what living in the age of airplanes does and is about. And it is really a philosophical, eye-opening, perspective shifting film about aviation and the world we live in today, that is a very super special time. And it was a very conceptual film to create, but one that I'm extremely proud of, and I feel like is really done everything I ever could have imagined and more, sort of like 1/6 Right. So that's really what it's about and its origin. And so it's but it's not about the planes and the pilots, and obviously 1/6 Right is very much that film, but there's certainly airplanes in it, and the hero is still the same, and the passion is still the same.
Yeah, it's really cool to hear you say it that way, because I like the word conceptual, because I think that really kind of that nails maybe the thing that a lot of people may not have gotten about the film, because I mean, I don't know what's hard to get about it. I get it. I think it's great. But kind of reading some reviews and so on, I noticed that there were some people that I think expected something different. And I don't know if it was just too advanced for them, too deep for them, too conceptual. With all the existence of YouTube and so on, I mean, if you want to see airplanes and just sit there and geek out watching airplanes take off and land, you can literally spend an endless amount of time doing that. And that's great, and we've all done it. But to have a conceptual film about aviation, I think might sort of, pardon the pun, but do a flyby on a couple of people. Do you think that might be true?
Oh, yeah. No, I think that's definitely true. I certainly think anyone familiar with 1/6 Right, and I understand this, and I knew this before the film would be released. I knew that there was now an expectation of me, or film that had my name on it, or this is made by that guy that made 1/6 Right. There's going to be inherently an expectation that it would hit some of the same notes, or include some of the same things, or for instance, to have interviews with pilots, or be pilot centric, at least in some way. And it's none of those things. It never was intending to be those things. And that's not how was designed, or how we've promoted it, or how it's been, positioned at all. But I think besides watching the trailer or reading about it, there's still maybe for some people, and luckily it's not the majority. The majority of people, it's gotten great reviews, and we've been in 50 cities and IMAX, and I mean, it's done, it's really been an incredible run. I mean, light years larger and better than 1/6 Right. But from the 1/6 Right audience pilot perspective, I think that for a lot of people, it was a surprise, or they didn't know what going in. But there's actually a lot of people that say, I had no idea what to think, or what I thought it was going to be, and it was so different, and I enjoyed it so much more. So there are, the instances where people were expecting one thing and they were delighted at how different it was. But of course, there are folks that were, wanting to basically see 1/6 Right Part 2, and it isn't that film. And part of the other motivation for me as a filmmaker is I felt I had already told the story of general aviation, and the importance of general aviation, and the value and passion that pilots have for flying through a pilot's eyes. I'm a pilot, and the audience largely is for pilots, and it really, 1/6 Right is, and it largely caters to that audience, the choir. But my greater aspiration is to excite and inspire people to see aviation the way I see it, and love it, and have a passion for it, that don't already have that. Because this is like 1%, or a fraction of 1%, that already have that outlook, and that appreciation, and that fondness for it. And to me, the ability of a film to reach an audience and inspire and change the thinking of the audience is so incredible, that the best thing I could do is reach an audience outside of the existing aviation audience. And that is exactly what the film was positioned and attempted to do, and eventually is exactly what it's done. And the fact that it's been released in 50 plus cities and IMAX, and these are mostly regular movie-going audience, and in museums and cinemas and Air and Space Museum, these sorts of things. They've never heard of 1/6 Right, and that is the core audience. So yeah, it's been a very interesting, journey, but this is just a part of, making an art piece, and it was important to me to tell the best story that I could, and not just serve an audience of the first film.
Sure. Now, as a creator, is that something that, when you sat down to make the film and make it the way you did, Was that something that worried you, or do you ever think about, hey, is this gonna? Obviously, there's the weight of expectation after 1/6 Right was such a home run, but did you think for a while that, okay, I'm making a different type of film? This one's more conceptual. It's shorter. It's not so much on the nuts and bolts of aviation operationally, but more conceptually how it's changed the world. Was that something that you went in sort of knowing that maybe people may or may not get, or is that something where you said, hey, that might be it, but I'm going to tell this story, and I think 99% of people are still going to dig it?
Yeah, I mean, I was definitely aware. As a pilot, and after seeing all the people react to what they reacted to in 1/6 Right, and knowing, I mean, I've got a lot of data, I guess you could say, from feedback, from reviews, from comments, from emails, from meeting thousands of people over a decade. I get what they loved about 1/6 Right, and I also know how this new movie is going to be different, prior to its release. And so I knew that there's going to be some people, or a lot of people, the biggest fans of 1/6 Right are going to be surprised. They're going to be surprised. It's going to be very different in how they take that. They could be, pleasantly surprised, or see the refreshing, bigger picture, view that the film has, and how it's bringing in everybody else, and that's its point. And if they see that and get that, they're going to get behind this film and say, wow, this shows aviation in a light that's never really been shown before, and almost like a special feature. You see that living in the age of airplanes first, to really get on the same page with this thing that aviation has contributed to our world. And then you watch 1/6 Right, and it kind of dives deeper into the specifics, and general aviation specifically, and pilots, and what it means to be a pilot. So, but I definitely, there's no question about the differences, but it didn't faze me, because for me, just like with 1/6 Right, the guiding principle and the guiding motivation to make the film is to tell a story that is so important to me, and a story that I want to tell from a certain perspective. The first movie was about my love of flying and my passion, and how to bottle that up and put that into a film that I could hit play and show somebody, and it's a better explanation and a visual, impactful experience than me trying to explain it myself. And then with the second film, I wanted it to be this eye-opening, conceptual, perspective shifting, I'll never think about airplanes or aviation the same way again, feeling for everybody else. And, so both films had different goals, and they have effectively different audiences, but I think that there's absolutely an overlap for sure. There's just some that if all they want to see is airplanes taking off and landing, and beauty shots of airplanes and nothing but airplanes, or people talking about airplanes, then it's impossible to satisfy that audience except showing them those things.
I'll tell you what, let's move in now to, I have some listener questions. And the first one is going to be from, her name's Jen Niffer, and she's pretty active in the aviation social media community. And her question is there a particular piece of footage in the movie that you're especially proud of being able to capture?
In Living in the Age of Airplanes?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say, in contrast to 1/6 Right, we shot this on all 7 continents, 18 countries, all 7 continents. 1/6 Right was shot in 1 square mile right around Van Nuys Airport. So vastly different in scope and scale and logistics to tell a story. But because it's about living in the age of airplanes and how the airplanes changed the world, we needed to go around the world and film around the world. So I was looking for places to show things in a way that I either haven't seen them before, or photograph them in a way to put them in context in a way that we would see aviation uniquely and in a very special way. And one of those places where there was a couple shots that I'd personally never seen before, and it's a hard thing to do with so much photography out there, great, incredible photography with Planet Earth. And I mean, my gosh, there's just such quality stuff this last 10 plus years. It's really difficult to come up with shots you haven't seen before. But in the Maldives, there was an opportunity to shoot airplanes from underwater with seaplanes taxiing and landing, taking off. And I specifically sought out that location to get some shots mirroring underwater photography and the seaplanes, and a couple shots made the cut of the film that I'm really proud of, and I think are really, really unique. I think one or two might be in the trailer, but there's a flyover shot and a couple taxi shots and stuff where there's a underwater camera integrating with aviation happening above it. So those are some of my favorite shots, and I think some of the most unique shots in the film.
I'm so glad you said that, because that whole scene that you filmed in the Maldives, again, with the underwater photography, and then right at the very end where those guys land the Twin Otter, and then they do like a 180 and then back it in onto the beach, and then the passengers can just walk off the float right onto the dry beach.
Yep.
That's probably one of the coolest things I've seen anybody do with an airplane in a long time. That was so cool.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. It's an amazing airplane, the Twin Otter, and it just is connecting all of those islands out there. There is no other way, because the water's so shallow. Even boats struggle to navigate the waters, and they can't even get that close to the islands, because the islands are effectively reefs in and of themselves. So the boats can't even get that close in most instances, but the float planes can, and they do. And that's the perfect example. It literally pulls up on the beach and yet can fly to any other of the 1,200 islands in the country. So it really did, you make a great point. So I'm glad you appreciated, that shot and how unique it is of a location and the airplane's role.
For sure. Now, I have a favorite scene in the movie, and it's probably not one of the most artistic, but right there in the opening sequence, that overhead pull-out zoom shot of SFO with I think it's a 737 taxiing out. Okay. There were two reasons I love this shot so much. Number one, in recent history, that's the very spot where the almost biggest air disaster in the history of aviation was narrowly averted, the Air Canada incident. Mm-hmm. And then secondly, that's actually kind of a powerful spot for me personally, because just off camera on the bottom right is a little park called Bayshore Park. It's right next to that hotel that's right there. And that was the spot where I was literally sitting watching airplanes, where after I had, I kind of took a break from aviation in my late teenage years. I lived up in the Bay Area myself. I went to college up in San Francisco just for a year, and, kind of was deciding what I really wanted to do with my life, and literally sitting right there at Bayshore Park on a bench with my radio. I bought a Radio Shack so I could listen to airplanes again, was the spot that I decided that I was going to get back into aviation as my lifetime career path. So when I saw that scene, I was immediately hooked on the movie, and it was really cool because just a personal connection with that spot, and then also now with the Air Canada thing. That's it. I don't think anybody thought you were getting that shot when you got it, but I really love that scene.
Yeah, no, it is. We really, again, there's a unique angle I'd never seen before. We were at 12,000 feet. Hovering above SFO in a helicopter and zooming out from a pretty tight shot of an airplane and zooming all the way out to see the entirety of the airport and all four runways. And it took many takes to have everything align. The airplane's movement, sometimes the plane would stop, taxiing for whatever reason. It needed to hold short of something, and so it sort of kills the momentum of the shot. And then also, sometimes in a helicopter, the rotation of the camera and or the axis of the helicopter, if we go beyond a vertical point, it starts looking odd and gets a vertigo effect. So there's certain reasons in such a long shot that it may not work, and we have to reset, start over. And anyways, the shot that ended up working in the moment in time that worked, it happened to be United Airlines plane. We weren't pursuing any one airline, but finally there was a take that was exactly what I was looking for. So yeah, it's a very photogenic airport as well, and a friendly one to film at. So we're very fortunate to get those shots there.
I was going to ask you that, how actually you did get the shot. So thanks for answering that. But to take it just a little bit further, so you're hovering at 12,000 feet in a helicopter. What was it like just to coordinate that with ATC?
Yeah, in many ways, the air traffic control coordination is easier than a lot of on-the-ground filming and logistics and permits of other places we filmed around the world. Air traffic control, it's some calls ahead of time, with our helicopter pilot, coordinating what we want to do, when we want to do it. But with a few phone calls and, clear understanding and in an ask that's reasonable, in and around the airspace where they can accommodate it, they tend to approve it. So I would say of all the shots we've done, it wasn't necessarily the most difficult to get approvals for, but we ended up 12,000 feet actually is above their airspace. So we're not really even in their airspace. So we flew a helicopter up from LA, repositioned at the General Aviation FBO there at SFO, refueled, and then took off, and then flew, out of the airspace, and then kind of got on top of that upside down wedding cake, and we're actually above the controlled airspace, but constant contact with I believe it was the tower. I don't know if it was a tower approach or who it was, but I think it was the tower. Because if we needed to descend or have any sort of situation where we wanted to land, we would come through the airspace, obviously, and land. So I believe it was probably the tower that the pilot was communicating with. But in any case, we were in constant communication, but we weren't even in their airspace. And then we would fly out, to the distance and make another approach to the airport to land. So anyway, that was, believe it or not, just a few phone calls and approvals on the day. But we were also doing air-to-air filming on the glide slope of aircraft landing at SFO as well. But again, similar approvals. They'd have to get permission from the pilots. There was going to be a helicopter, on the parallel or following you or outside the taxiway. And we got approvals for all of it. It was amazing.
Cool. Well, I guess we should give a huge shout out to NorCal Approach and SFO Tower for those, huh?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Another shot in San Francisco that I really loved was at, towards the end of the film, the night time lapse over the Bay Area. Mm-hmm. That was probably the coolest time lapse I've ever seen. That was really awesome. And you can see the airplanes coming and going from all the major airports. You could see SFO, Oakland. I think in the distance, you could see stuff coming off of San Jose. But just the amount of traffic that you guys got, that was a really cool shot.
Yeah, it was, again, one of those interesting ways to see aviation in a way you don't see it is through time lapse and the landing lights. A lot of people at first, they thought they were helicopters or they kind of resemble fireflies, but it's obviously something aviation related, but they almost seem to move more like helicopters in their zigzag nature. They're moving so fast, but we don't ever see it that way. That's, of course, the beauty of time lapse. You're seeing things that the human eye can never experience. Sure. And airplanes at nighttime is something that's, you don't really see airplanes at nighttime. You only see the lights of airplanes at nighttime. And then you compound that with time lapse that's sped up, very quickly. So in a few seconds, you're seeing a few hours. And the results are just these really perplexing shots of this movement that is almost doesn't even look real, because the flight paths are compressed so much, and the movement is erratic and incredibly systematic all at the same time, and it looks futuristic. Anyway, yeah, it really does it shows how magnificent and complicated, complex, beautiful, and amazing and futuristic. It's almost like we're living in the future seeing this, but it's really the present, and that's part of what the film is trying to say. Is when we so often think about, gosh, I can't wait till it's going to be so much better in the future, or boy, it used to be better in the past and the good old days. Rarely are we fascinated with and think we've got it pretty darn good right now, or be totally satisfied, content with, and appreciative of the here and now and what we already have. There's often a want or desire for more or for the way it used to be. And the film focuses really, really a lot on the beauty and amazement of this moment in time that we're living in the age of airplanes. And those shots, I think, are undeniably science fiction-like, and to know it's today is a perfect way to make the point.
All right. Now, I guess maybe my last, I don't know if it was my favorite scene, but one that I just thought was so funny was the scene with the Ford Tri-Motor, and then you have Harrison Ford narrating. And I'm not going to lie, I went back and watched Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom right after that.
That's funny. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's move on to talking about that a little bit. How, obviously we all know the film was narrated by Harrison Ford, and he doesn't need much of an introduction or background, but tell us about how you I guess got him to be the narrator of the film, and what it was like working with him.
Yeah. So I had a chance to meet him sometime after 168 came out, maybe in the next year or two. It was at Oshkosh. We were actually both poll holders for Sean Tucker at Oshkosh, and he was familiar with the film at that point, and it was already out on DVD, and we talked about it briefly, and he was really complimentary and then since allowed me to use a quote from him about the film, about 1/6 Right. And obviously connected with him in the way I would hope it connected with others. So it was just obviously an unbelievable compliment coming from him. So we had kept in touch and seen each other at a few events over the years. And when it came to the time that I was finishing this most recent film and I needed a narrator, he was top of mind because a couple reasons. What's critical to me as a filmmaker and as someone where the narrator is going to carry the entire film, where this was a 6-year effort for me to make this movie. And it all comes down to ultimately a couple days in a VO session with the voice of the film. There are no interviews. It's 100% narrated, like March of the Penguins. And we all know what a contribution Morgan Freeman made, of course, to March of the Penguins. And it is, you can make or break a film in your narration. And it happens really, really quickly in that session. And it was important that I made the right choice. And there were a lot of celebrities. Of course, it's great to have a celebrity narrator because of their name and the name recognition and all of that can come with that. But if they're not telling your story in the best possible way, and if they don't have the passion for the words and the story they're telling, then it comes through, and it can actually be a liability. And I've heard it. I've heard many narrated films where, okay, yep, it's a big star, it's maybe a great voice, but you can tell they're reading. They're not fully in the, not character so much, but they're not fully involved and engulfed in the content. And it is a fine line, but one that can truly make or break it. So I really felt that he would understand it. He would get the potential that he would really be connected. And if so, I know he could take it home better than anybody. And so I met with him, showed him the film as a temporary narrator in there at the time. And the conversation we had after, I knew he was the right guy, and he was completely committed to it and absolutely nailed it. And I couldn't be happier with the performance. And we recorded it in actually 2014 is when it was recorded. And he was a total pro, and went back and we did pickup lines and all the things we needed to do to get it just right. And he was, in it to win it, and really just nailed it. I couldn't be happier.
So in the course of making these two movies, this is another question from Jennifer. Was there a particular person you met or maybe moment that you experienced that stands out as being particularly impactful on like a personal level?
Well, I would say in the making of Living in the Age of Airplanes, I mean, this was like a top 10 moment for me in my life, and it's actually became a special feature in Living in the Age of Airplanes. But it was when we were filming in Africa. We had a helicopter. We were doing aerial sequences over the landscapes out there. And the owner of the helicopter actually had a yellow biplane. It was as his personal airplane. And I saw it at the airport when we were in and out with our helicopter operations. And I asked if we could do some filming of his yellow biplane, air to air, like a 1/6 Right style. And there really wasn't a place for it in the film, but I just couldn't be in Africa with a yellow biplane, and kind of a throwback to Out of Africa, which was a very featured scene. They had a yellow biplane in Africa. And so when I saw that he had this plane, and we had the helicopter and, of course, the camera system and the cameraman, and there was nothing stopping us from doing some filming with his permission, and he agreed. So we did it. So we ended up shooting a lot of footage with this yellow biplane. And only one shot actually made the film because, like I said, it really never had a purpose in the movie. But we did other things with it and mainly special features. But there was a moment, a life experience where we had to land because we were entering some bad weather. A storm was coming in. We had to land on the ground and save the fuel because we didn't want to fly all the way back to the home airport. We wanted to continue to film in the area we were in. So the helicopter and the airplane could land in this sort of a grassy area. It wasn't even an airport. But anyways, we both sat down and waited for this weather to clear, and we were in the middle of nowhere. But right upon landing, I mean, within a minute of landing, all of these kids just came out of nowhere, like I still to this day don't understand what happened or where they came from, but they descended upon, as soon as the rotor stopped and the engine stopped in the biplane, they descended upon this airplane and helicopter and surrounded it. I mean, like 50 people, 60 people. It was incredible. And there was a communication barrier. I wasn't able to speak with these native African people, but they were so amazed and so joyous and so struck by these two incredible machines that just kind of came out of nowhere for them. And they were very likely seeing aviation for the first time. And to them, it was amazing and beautiful and extraordinary, and all the things that the movie is trying to convey to the jaded population today. And the irony and beauty of seeing them see aviation the way that I'm hoping to show it in a film to people that aren't as new to it. It was so refreshing and incredible and inspiring of a moment, and really, really was very, very special. So I had my iPhone with me, took some videos and picture, and all of that became part of the special feature to tell the story of that moment on that day. But that was, talk about giving me a boost of adrenaline and passion to continue on the path I was on. And I never would have been in that position or had that experience had I not pursued filming with this biplane. We never would have ended up in this area. So yeah, it truly was a top 10 moment in my life. That
wow.
day.
All right, another question. This is from Stacy Lutz. She asks, what do you think the Wright brothers would think of advancements that we have today, such as jet engines and space flight?
Yeah, it's a fascinating question. I don't know. It's. I think they would be. I think it would. It's. I think unimaginable. I think it was truly an unimaginable thing, knowing the materials that their aircraft were made from, and the capacity that their aircraft had to transport people and the distance it was able to go. It just. I can't imagine the thought of a 747 or an A380 transporting hundreds of people across, entire continents and oceans in single sittings. I truly think it'd be unimaginable. And if they were to somehow know or see today what we have, I think they would be completely mesmerized and struck by how far this has come. And in some ways, how similar, as far as the airfoil and the shape and ultimate function of the plane. It's really similar. It's just a much larger scale. So that's, when I think about the future now, it's unimaginable. I think anything that I could ever imagine what it will be like in 100 years from now is, I can't even imagine. I can't even pretend to be able to think of what that might be. But it's really interesting to think about, what. And I don't know if there's any documentation of what they thought the future was or what they saw as the ultimate, iteration of their airplane. And if they ever could have imagined hundreds of people and going thousands of miles. I'm not sure. But I'd say they'd be quite impressed and quite proud of what they set in motion.
What do you think about with the rise of YouTube and vlogging as a form of filmmaking and sort of the general accessibility of filmmaking that we're enjoying today? What do you think about that and its effect on filmmaking at large?
Well, I think it's, from when I first started and my first film, made in 2003 and 4, released 2005, 13 years ago, none of this existed. The platform and ability to reach thousands, if not millions of people with your content, that just didn't exist at the time. So it is incredible that this is possible now, that the whole essence of, for me as a filmmaker, and I think everybody on YouTube and people that vlog, they have a story, they have an idea, they have a message, they have a brand, they have something that they want to share, and they have a platform to share it. And it is I think the aspiration of every filmmaker and what we've always wanted to do, and the fact that now it can be done so quickly. Heck, it can be done live, of course, right? So you can get content out to everybody instantly, and it's incredible. It's an amazing time on the technology side and the filmmaking distribution side that we are able to connect with and reach everybody with our content. So I think it's great, and I think it's raising the bar for the quality of the content. Some of this is just incredibly good content, and I definitely think things are changing, and with streaming and everything digital, and people of course want content the way they want it, when they want it, where they want it, on the device of their choice, and that's a really important thing now, to make sure that you're creating content for audiences the way they want it and the way they want to see it. So I think it's a great thing, and it's changing fast. I will say that it's changing fast, but I think it's very, very, very positive change.
Now, that change in how we consume content from VHS into DVDs and then Blu-rays and then now probably just streaming for most people, how has that affected your filmmaking?
Well, it hasn't yet, but it will certainly going forward. The most recent film, Living the Age of Airplanes, was shot between 2010 and 2012, and then edited 13, 14, and released 2015 in IMAX. And its intent was always theatrical. That was the original vision for the film. An IMAX release with National Geographic and all the cities it went to was the best possible outcome for that film based on its goals. And eventually then it went in 2016 onto DVD, Blu-ray, and iTunes and other digital platforms. So its release was still, I guess, very traditional in the sense, and the time that it happened, of course, it's late in this transition from physical disc and media to streaming, but it's still in a sweet spot. But starting a film today with the potential it might not be released for 3, 4, 5 years from now, and the type of films that I make and the type of time they take to create, it's certainly an incredible consideration to know how different that landscape already is now in 2018, but a few years from now it will be even that much more swung to the other side, to the digital side. So it really is shaping my thoughts on distribution and creation of content, and it's definitely part of my active thought process because I'm very aware of the world we're in now, and so yeah, it's a very interesting time for sure. So to be continued.
So what plans do you have? Can you give us any teasers of upcoming projects?
Not yet. There's some things we're working on, but haven't. When they're in the very early stages, I like to keep the cards close until it evolves to something that's really worth talking about, and it takes the shape that it will eventually have. So I can't quite say at the moment, but there's still a lot of focus actually on Living in the Age of Airplanes and its release, and there's some things coming up soon for some other distribution channels. The film is going to continue to expand to, and there's some special screenings still happening. We had a Chinese theater screening in Hollywood at the end of last year, and there's some other IMAX runs that are actually going to get started later this year. So that movie is still going strong, and so there's certainly some energy still being put into that film, as well as 1/6 Right, as another film was brewing. So we'll have to touch base again to talk more about that. But it's an exciting time. Things are definitely evolving, and I think there's obviously a continual need for exciting new content and sharing messages with the world. So it's an incredible business to be in.
Sure. Well, we all can't wait.
Well, thanks.
So I have one more question
Sure.
for you, and it's from Paula, and she wants to know, what is the best question an interviewer ever asked you?
Wow. Gosh. I can't answer that. I can't think of what that might be. I don't have any answer top of mind. I know that I've done a lot of Q&As with the film, and usually the questions are similar, and there's a few that I get almost every time, and every so often there's a total left field question, and they're always fun because you don't see them coming, or it might be a kid in the audience and ask something that it's a great question and a totally valid question, but boy, it's an answer that I've never had to come up with or think about before, and it's always fun when that happens. But as far as in an interview, I can't think of what that might be. I'm sorry, I don't have it top of mind, but I always enjoy talking about the films, and the questions that come up they're always interesting. It's interesting to see what people take away and what their thought process is, and what they want to know about. So it's fun to interact.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what, then I have just one last question for you.
Okay. Maybe this is it.
Oh, now the weight of expectation. Here we are. No.
Yeah.
All right. Do you feel gratified, like you're doing what you were put on this earth to do?
Oh, yeah, totally. Yeah, absolutely. I think it was a real blessing that I didn't actually pursue or was able to pursue a career in aviation, and instead have been able to tell stories and make movies about aviation, because I feel that my talents, or my interest and the persistence and perseverance that I've applied to filming and filmmaking have affected more people, and is probably, hopefully, done more good for the world than me being a commercial pilot. And I feel, and that's just for me, and I think that being a pilot is an incredible career path, and one that I wanted for a very long time. But I feel like for me personally, the career that I've ended up pursuing and achieving, I really feel is something I can't imagine it any other way now, and I really feel gratified, very much so.